So we were both very motivated by a problem that we perceived in the world, which is that almost everybody is born with this innate desire to make music, and everybody tries to learn an instrument at some point, and almost all of those people quit after 6 months or a year or whatever, because learning to play an instrument is just too damn difficult for most people. They don't have the time or talent or patience or whatever, and so the world is full of all these people who feel the urge to make music but have no way to tap into that desire, and we wanted to solve that problem, and we actually started doing a bunch of early research in that area in, when we were students.
Yeah, and we both know what it feels like to play music. We're both musicians.
Well, Eran's a real musician. I'm a fake musician.
Well, Alex is a pretty talented musician too. But I play clarinet. I play classical music. So I've sort of gone on a very sort of formal, traditional training route. And we both performed. We both know what it's like to be on stage, and it's this really amazing, magical feeling to play in front of a crowd, and even better to do a good job and to get a reaction from the crowd. It's one of these highs that you get, and I think a lot of people would love to experience that. Except, like Alex was saying, they can't because either they haven't put the time in or it's been too frustrating or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the crowd element is one layer of it, but even below that there's a layer which is just physically making sound with your body as one of these incredibly joyful experiences that's hardwired into us as creatures that
right.
We all
feel.
feel.
And because there's research about this. Music is such a huge part of who we are, and it's cross-cultural. I mean, we've been making music and singing and tapping out rhythms for such a long time.
And dancing, basically, for
right.
It's from the origins of man. This is
right.
part of who we are.
People think that language is older than, music is older than language. So there's, it's pretty deep rooted. At any rate, we were interested in taking this connection that we know exists between music and people, and allowing people to experience that music more deeply. So of course people listen to music a lot, and they go to concerts, and they have music in their ears with their iPods and all that, but how do we get people to interact with music more deeply and really experience it in a more performative kind of way?
Around 97, 98, we saw the first music games start to emerge from Japan. Parappa was a particularly impactful game for us, Parappa the Rappa, which was created by Masaya Matsura in Japan. So these were some of the early rhythm action games that turned rhythmic input into gameplay. And it's funny, at the very beginning, conceptually we kind of looked down on it because it wasn't very sophisticated compared to the kind of stuff that we were doing. But when we actually played it for the first time, we realized a couple of things. First of all, it was incredibly accessible and incredibly fun. And more importantly, it had stickiness and staying power because it gave...
Well, it provided a goal.
It provided a goal,
right.
Objective criteria for success and failure. And that
right.
kind of framework is what gives people the ability to keep engaging and trying to improve themselves.
I mean, it's essentially, it's kind of what games do, right? They tease you with a little problem or a mission or a puzzle or something like that, and if the game is set up well, then you will, it finds that point where you want to keep going and keep trying because it's a challenging problem, but it's not too frustrating. So,
and the moment you capture the shiny object, you get your first glimmer of the next shiny
right,
object
exactly.
in the distance.
So what ended up happening was that we had this great music system, but it didn't really have a goal other than just to allow you to improvise music. The artistic vibe of Frequency is pretty...
Well, the musical sensibility was electronica focused,
techno-electronica.
And the visual design was also very kind of cyberscapey.
Right.
So very electronic and abstract and kind of cold visual design.
Yeah, in fact, so Greg LaPiccolo, who is our VP of Product Development, kind of had the initial idea of having this tunnel that you are traveling through, where the surfaces of this tunnel would be musical material. It's kind of this notion of traveling through, through space, and maybe even through inside the computer in this sort of cyber kind of sensibility. We kind of latched onto that. We thought that was a cool idea, and we kind of kept going. We had no idea what the gameplay would be at the time. And where we ended up with was a game that was essentially a multi-track beat matching game, where each surface or each subsurface that you can be on inside this tunnel represents an instrument. And so that instrument might be drums or bass, guitar, keyboards, even vocals, kind of spread all around this tunnel. As you're traveling through it, you get to hear the music, and in fact, you are supposed to play the music by beat matching. So there's this, it's a kind of this multi-track experience where you're essentially discovering what the music is about, because it starts off in silence, essentially. And as you travel through this tunnel, you're unlocking more and more of the music.
Yeah, so the painful lesson for us from Frequency and Amplitude is that we had created a game, or a pair of games, that we were very proud of, artistically, musically, from a game design standpoint. We were really proud of those games.
And they rated very high.
Yeah, reviewers loved them. We won tons of awards and we got great scores.
And they didn't sell very well.
And they did not sell well at all. And not for lack of trying. I mean, we had a great publisher, Sony, who put real marketing money behind them and really made an effort. But the kind of cold, hard lesson that we learned from those games was that it's not enough to make a game that is fun once you start playing it. You need to make a game that can be easily explained and that can be sold to people conceptually, even without them ever having tried it. Now, this was in 2000, right? You know, in 2011, now with digital distribution, there are actually plenty of ways to get games into people's hands under free-to-play models or demos so they can try it. And a big part of your marketing for a game today can actually be distribution of free demos. In 2000 and 2001, when we were making Frequency and Amplitude, there was no cost-effective way to do that. So then more than now, I mean, I think it's still true now, actually. There needs to be something clear and aspirational in a game concept to really launch it into the world, but it was especially true then. And those games, I mean, you know, you heard from Eran's description earlier, it was really difficult to describe what those games were about. What was the metaphor? Who am I? What am I really doing here? It was new. It was unlike anything people had ever seen before. And boy, that makes for a very difficult game to market. And
and the other thing is those games were actually kind of difficult, you know, which is something that I think we also underappreciated at the time. I just went back to play the first level of Frequency. You know, just your experience, just kind of coming straight into this game that you've never seen before, and it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
You know, the beats you have to play are not that easy, and I think we learned a lot from that too. Certainly in Karaoke Revolution, that was a much kind of easier, more welcoming, more accessible game. But then when we moved on to Guitar Hero, you know, I think we paid very close attention to making sure that the ramp into the game was nice and gentle.
Becoming a master of Guitar Hero and playing like insane solos, you know, that takes like 4 months of hard labor, whereas in Guitar Hero or Rock Band, whereas in the real world that would be like, I don't know, 28 years of hard labor to play an equivalent, you know, expert guitar solo. So it's just the ratio between work and payoff is so much better in
the coordination involved. And sort of the muscle memory and the thought process you go through as you learn these things is probably not that dissimilar from actually learning a real instrument. And
well, there's also an inspirational element to it. It's not just the physical technique, but I think people get a taste of what it feels like to make music on an instrument, and that's hugely inspirational. Like we get letters all the time from fans who basically say, "Look, thank you for Rock Band or Guitar Hero. You know, I've gone on after you know getting inspired by Guitar Hero or Rock Band, I've gone on to learn real guitar, or after developing skills in drums and Rock Band, I've gone on to become a real drummer."
Right. We've done surveys of guitar teachers across America, where we have found, you know, very quantifiably that they have more students interested in taking guitar lessons because of Guitar Hero and Rock Band.
First we made Guitar Hero, right? And then for the next product cycle, we essentially had to make a game that, you know, in addition to guitar, added bass and drumming gameplay with a completely new interface and hardware design, and singing gameplay, and meaningful interaction between all of those things, with the downloadable content infrastructure for selling new music.
And online gameplay.
And online gameplay, and. I mean, it was just all of these things.
And we huge game.
Also, we were software developers. We had never made physical products in our lives.
Right, so, because for Guitar Hero, it was Red Octane who was in charge of making the guitars. So while we were helping in the sense of looking at guitars and critiquing them and stuff like that, they had to deal with it. Now all of a sudden we had to deal with making hardware in China, which is an enormously complicated and expensive operation. It was completely nuts. At the peak of manufacturing guitars and drums and these microphones, I think we were employing something like
13,000 people in China.
13,000 people in China.
We also had great help from MTV. All the prior games had been cover versions of songs. We had just been licensing the compositions and producing covers. But for Rock Band, a big part of the creative ambition for that title was a feeling of authenticity, which meant we wanted to go after original master recordings. And MTV was pretty huge in putting together the partnerships with all the major label groups to actually make a soundtrack full of original masters.
And one of the real challenges for us was to make it feel like it was a full band playing together. In other words, that you cared about what your other band members were doing. And we'd had a lot of different mock-ups and trying out different ways to break up the real estate of the screen to show all the different components. And that was kind of a real explicit goal that we had, and we weren't really sure how we were going to solve it. It ended up manifesting itself in a number of different game mechanics.
Like Back from the Brink, where players could save others who had failed out, or all of the streaking and multiplier mechanics, where one person's streak actually ends up benefiting other players, or overdrive deployment. And so
right,
players
or things like unison phrases, where all of the band members together have to play this phrase perfectly in order to get this extra bonus. But where we ended up with, I think, was a game where you did. You obviously you cared about how you were playing, but you also cared about how your bandmates were playing.
A point came in the evolution of the Rock Band franchise where it was time for us to start thinking about what was next. And we now had this proficiency with alternate input devices and hardware manufacturing. And we had actually been motivated by dance games for quite a long time. Even, we thought the early Dance Dance Revolution games were great. We really enjoyed them. But we also found them to be a pretty shallow simulation of dancing, because stepping on buttons on a floor isn't really what dancing is about. It's a full body experience. And so, and around, 2008 or 2009, something like that, we decided to start prototyping a dance game. And so we were working with, off-the-shelf hardware, sensing hardware of a variety of types, and prototyping different dance experiences that tracked the motion of your whole body, not just not.
Yeah, this is where we were really figuring out, very basics of how do you teach people to dance. What do you do? Do you try to make it like a dance studio? Do you try to make it like something else? Do you mimic what Avatar is doing in front of you, kind of mirror image style? Do you have a bunch of abstract objects coming towards you that you have to hit? It could have been anything, but through a bunch of experimentations, we sort of arrived at essentially what is the kind of the Dance Central methodology of teaching you how to dance and setting up gameplay around it. And like Alex was saying, initially we weren't using the Kinect because it didn't exist yet, and we were actually using our own sensor hardware for that. What happened was we had developed this dance game quite a ways, and one day we get a call from Microsoft saying, you guys have to come to Redmond and check something out, and we won't tell you what it is. Like, great. So we sent a team out there, and they were blown away, because they came back saying, like, all right, these guys really have something here. And we had even seen 3D cameras before, but the way that Microsoft put the whole package together with the sensor, and the microphone array and the skeletal tracking of up to 4 people, and the whole business, it really totally worked. And it was actually not that hard at that point to take that prototype hardware and marry it with the dance experience that we had already been developing. And it was really what allowed us to be a launch title for Kinect, with what I think was a pretty sophisticated, highly polished game, right the day that Kinect came out.
Being archived is not something that you're thinking about early on, but I do think our ambitions were pretty lofty when we started the company.
Yeah,
we really wanted to tilt culture in a certain way in terms of people's relationship with music. We really wanted to invent new kinds of music play, invent new ways to connect people with music that they love, that they hadn't experienced before, to amplify people's emotional reaction to music, and kind of reprogram what music entertainment is. So in that respect, I think that to whatever degree, however minor, we're actually able to pull that off, then I guess it's not surprising that that would end up being recorded as an aspect of cultural evolution.
Yeah, we just can't believe it actually happened.
Yeah, right.
Right, it's one thing to have a plan. Look, there's lots of plans out there, right? but the fact that it even came anywhere close to, to what we had imagined is it's amazing.